Hey everybody, this is Brenda Devine from Purpose 8 Institute, and you're listening to my podcast, Living a Life of Purpose, where we discuss the importance of purpose in our everyday lives. Discovering and living out your purpose keeps you focused on God's purpose. That is sharing the good news of salvation with others. This podcast is for people like me, still searching for the answers to who am I and why am I here? You and I were designed and created by God for purpose, and we have much to do. You can listen and subscribe to my podcast, Living a Life of Purpose with Brenda Devine on Anchor and all other podcast platforms. Hey, this is Brenda Devine from Purpose 8 Institute. Thank you for joining me as we continue our conversation about living a life of purpose. So the last time we talked, we were talking about the question of God, what is my purpose? And that, in my opinion, is one of the most important, probably the most important question that we can ever ask. I know it was for me, that question of asking God, what is my purpose? So I want to go from there and segue into today's topic, which is pride. So to ask the question of our Creator, what is my purpose? It takes a level of humility to ask our Creator, what is my purpose? And I say it takes a level of humility because we live in a culture where it is all about, we are told that life is all about us, that we each are the center of our own universe, and that all of the world revolves around us, that we are in control of everything, that we can do any and everything with our own strength. We have a culture that constantly has a narrative of telling us what we are and what we are not. We are constantly engaged in messaging and communication, written, movies, songs, social media, family. We are friends, enemies. We are constantly engaged in a narrative of who we are and who we are not. So, when we ask that question, I'm going to say that when we ask that question of our Creator and ask, God, what is my purpose? There is a point of humility that we have to put down everything that we have known in the past. And that is really difficult when we are operating out of a mindset of self and pride. So, I know a lot about pride. A lot. And we all have levels of pride. And I'm going to suggest, if you think back when we were talking about the different distractions and labels and titles that we have discussed and that you have spent the time thinking about, I'm going to suggest, and I'm going to challenge you to go back and do your own thinking, but I'm pretty sure that if you go back, you're going to see that there, within all of those distractions, all of those titles and hurts and busyness and other habits that you have discovered about the old me, I'm going to suggest that there are threads of pride running through every one of them. Yeah, pride. Pride is so sneaky. It is so subtle. It weaves itself in all of our lives, and often we don't even see it as pride. We see it as this messaging, or we see it as a response to a justification for being hurt. But that pride is the downfall. It is the downfall of many of us. I can look back and be honest with myself and say that pride has crippled me in many ways throughout my life, because I allowed pride to lead me. I allowed pride to direct my thoughts and my emotions. I allowed pride to be the head of my life. And pride, we don't even see it as that. So I just want to introduce in today's topic about pride, how dangerous it is. Because it's dangerous because of its effects on us and how it is embedded in our relationships with ourselves, with friends and family, and it is embedded also in our relationship with God. So when you've asked the question, God, what is my purpose? We have to realize that not only do we have to have an open and receptive heart when we ask this question, but we have to ask this question with a level of humility. Okay? Humility, because we have to realize we are asking our Creator. Now, you got to really wrap your head around that. We often think we are our own gods, that we've created our life, that what we've accomplished, what we've done, our education, our position in life, we think that we did it all. We have not. We've put in effort. We've put in some work. We've put in time. But none of that was under our own strength and ability. We think it was, because we say we built this life. I've been there. I know. I lived off of that. But we haven't. We are not God. We act like we're God. We think we're God, but we're not God. And we live this life thinking that we are in control, and we are not in control of anything. You are not even in control of your breath. Within seconds, your breath can be taken away, and you have no strength to get it back and start breathing again. You have absolutely no control. We are not God. And that is really hard when we live in a culture that tells us that we are gods of our own life, gods of our own destiny, gods of our own abilities. We are not. We are not. So when we come to God as the creation and ask the question of the Creator, we have to realize what position we're in. We're not in the front asking God to tell us because He owes us something. We are in the back. We are on the bottom. We are looking up, asking that question, God, what is my purpose? Okay? So we got to have that frame of mind of who we talking to. Okay? We are talking to the Creator, who is sovereign, who has created this world, this universe, everything that is in it. And we are simply vapors, puffs of vapor here for but a time. So you have to realize and embrace really what you are. Ask that question of your Creator. God, what is my purpose? So you have to come with a humbleness when you ask that question. God is in charge and you are not. So you got to wrap your head around that. And it'll take a little bit because we have the tendency to think that we are in control and we are not in control. So I want to talk about humble, but I also want to talk about submit. And oftentimes when you say submit to people, they get this feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm going to submit, and it's going to be difficult. When you submit your life to God, when you submit, you are saying that, God, you have control. I bow down. I bow down to you. And you are in front and I am in back. And when you think that you're God, you want to put yourself in front and put God in back. And when we say the words, and we often hear this, Lord, I want to follow. I'm following Jesus. Lord, I want to follow you. Well, that means that you have to be in the back. Following means being in the back. Doesn't mean being in the front leading. It means being in the back, being a servant. So God is in front. You are in back. He's leading. You're following. He's Lord. You're servant. We have to wrap our mind around that. And it takes a minute. It's a process. Because as you are discovering more about yourself and taking off those layers and having a willingness to align your life to God's will, you will see that you need to submit. And submit is not a once-in-a-time declaration. It is an everyday process. It might be, depending on your day, it might be an hour-to-hour process, depending on how your day is going. I know that for certain because I am constantly submitting, reminding myself to submit that God is in front and I am in the back. So don't be discouraged. Just encourage yourself. Get back up. Find your position in the back and let God follow. And then the third thing I want to talk about is obedience. Now, obedience is the willingness to do what God has asked you to do. So you've asked this question, God, what is my purpose? And you're going to be challenged when you hear what God wants you to do, or if you already know what God wants you to do, you're going to be challenged on the obedience part. And that pride that we talked about, that pride that has been weaved in your life, it just doesn't go away. It is subtle, it is deep, it is heartfelt, it is embedded in you. Okay? So you are going to be challenged on the obedience. So here's the thing that I think about with obedience. My perspective. So I know what God has asked me to do. to tell people they have value and they have purpose. Now, when God wants me to do something, and He prompts me to do something, and there's a natural inclination to fight it because we are uncomfortable, because He is going to ask you to do something that you're uncomfortable doing. You have the ability to do it because in your creation, He designed and created you for what He wants you to do. But we don't fully understand everything about us. So we're going to challenge it because we've been comfortable living the life that we've been living. So it's like, oh, wait a minute. You want me to do what? I don't know anything about that. I don't want to do that. That's the natural inclination that we're going to say, nope, I don't want to do that. I don't know what people are going to say about me. I get it. But you have to pray about it, and you have to ask God for the strength and the wisdom, okay? And when I have been given something, God's telling me to do something, I have to be obedient to it. I go back to the foundation of my life and go, God has told me what my purpose is and who I am. If I am not about His purpose, then I am not who I am. I'm not who I say I am. If I say I live a life of purpose, if I write about it, if I speak about it, if I teach about it, I have to be accountable to that. I can't live a life of purpose if I'm not willing to do what God has asked me to do. So that is the framework, the framing of how I think about it. If I say this is who I am, if I say this is who God has called me to be, and I don't want to do what He asked me to do, then I am basically saying that He got it wrong. And that's not possible. So I have to, in reading and studying and praying, eventually I will align myself to His will and do what He asked me to do and be obedient in it. Now, the things that I've talked about, the being humble and the submission and the obedience, all of those, pride is going to challenge you on every one of them. So you have to be prepared. And that is also why it is so important to know who you are, to look deeper into those distractions and those titles and those positions and those emotions and those experiences, and realize that you are not a sum of those, but you are God's child, and you were created and designed for purpose. So as you ask your question, God, what is my purpose? And as you wait for the answer, or as you have heard the answer and you are wrapping your mind around it of what God has asked you to do, know that you will be challenged, that your pride will come up. Your pride will constantly be talking to you. Okay? And you have to remember also where pride comes from. Pride comes from Satan as well. So, we can talk about that a little later, another time. But just realize that pride originated with Satan, and it's manifested in this earth, and it weaves itself through our lives. And as you realize that you have been called for purpose, that you are created and designed for purpose, you will be challenged. You will be challenged, and the important thing is to realize that on this journey, we have to be accountable to ourselves. And we have to realize that this is not going to be a smooth journey. There are so many experiences that we have with God, the grace and the mercy and the favor and the blessings. But there's also times that we are challenged to do His will, to be who He has called us to be, and to be humble, to submit to His word, and to be obedient to His word and do what He has asked us to do. So I'm going to leave you with that, because that's a lot. And we'll carry on with this conversation. So I thank you for your time. This is Brenda Devine from Purpose 8 Institute. Talk to you in a little bit. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining me on my podcast, Living a Life of Purpose, on Anchor and all other major podcast platforms. To learn more about Purpose 8 Institute and our ministry of sharing the importance of purpose, please visit our website, www.purpose8institute.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and even TikTok. If you would like to learn more about purpose beyond this podcast, Living a Life of Purpose, you can also purchase one of my books that are available on my website, purpose8institute.com, and also on Amazon.